I'm Rob Dietz.
I'm Jason Bradford.
And I'm Asher Miller. Welcome to Crazy Town, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is the voice of reason.
Guys, we're doing it, aren't we? This is season 5. Is that a big season? Is like
what is it in anniversaries? Like
right.
When you're married, is it 10?
Is 5 a big deal?
I have no idea. It feels like a big
cubic
deal.
zirconium.
Yeah. Okay. We all get a cubic zirconium at the end of the season if we make it through.
If we make it through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, so I'm pretty excited about this season, and I'm also excited to talk about as a way of introducing this season, this episode, a wonderful experience that myself and my family had at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge.
Oh yeah, over in southeastern Oregon there.
Oregon is amazing. The central Oregon, the southeast, the dry part of the state, geological wonders abound. You know, it's not as vegetated, so you can kind of see the rocks.
Like cubic zirconium cliffs and
yeah,
stuff?
there's like mountains of the stuff.
It's funny because when people think of Oregon, they think of, I remember that joke but from Jim Gaffigan, like people in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest are dressed like a hike is about to break out.
Yeah.
They imagine rain and you know, people like huddled and, you know, drinking coffee or whatever, smoking clove cigarettes.
Yeah.
But Eastern Oregon is not like that.
It's this high desert. It's the northern end of the Basin and Range area, part of North America, and so they've got this. You've got basically these big escarpments, these mountains, and then almost cliff-like faces to them. But in between these mountain ranges, there are all these basically, you know, lake systems and rivers feeding into them that never make it to the ocean. So a lot of them are alkaline and there's just weird biodiversity everywhere. But the place I want to talk about is a national wildlife refuge that is famous in the birding community. So I wasn't really into...
Birding or burning?
Birding. Yeah,
okay.
Tweets and stuff like that. And cackle, whatever. Yeah. I'm not a real experienced birder yet, so I don't do the sounds. I listen for the sounds. But this is where I got into it, where I suddenly brought binoculars. We were there during the May, migration pattern, important places. And you realize what's happened is that a lot of these national wildlife refuges are like remnant wetlands that have now been augmented because a lot of wetlands been lost. And so they try to make the wetlands that remain extra productive and special.
You know, you're talking my language now. I used to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service in the National Wildlife Refuge System. So all the biologists at the refuges, they're trying to mimic historical conditions, and they're often pumping water here and there to supply the migratory birds with the ponds and wetlands that they need.
So you're driving through this place, and there's incredible vistas of mountains and rock formations, and then these flat areas that have various levels of water, and different birds are attracted to different levels of water, and it's crazy because all these birds are moving through, and they're in just giant numbers, and they're super colorful. And so I was just absolutely thrilled by the place. And it was interesting because it was so peaceful there and wonderful, and everyone was having a good time. But then I also knew that a few years before, it was kind of a shit show.
Yeah. If we're going to talk about Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, I mean, it's nice that you had this experience, and I can attest, you become a super birder nerder. Is that a word?
Yes, I admit.
Just unbelievable.
I don't have the highest end binocular set yet.
Yeah. You don't have the spotting scope or whatever. You haven't spent thousands of dollars, but you'll get there. You'll get there. Yeah. Well, but if we're going to talk about that particular refuge, you got to go back to January 2nd, 2016.
I was there. It was amazing. An incredible experience. One of the highlights of my life. Really.
So we didn't know this, but Asher, your middle name is actually Bundy, isn't it?
It's Eamon Bundy Jr.
So back then, at the beginning of 2016, of course, you may be familiar that this group of right-wing nut jobs with lots of guns showed up at the refuge.
They were freedom-loving patriots.
Right,
Excuse me.
Right. You know, tomato.
Right, exactly. Let's agree to disagree.
Right. So they held this refuge hostage, I guess. Can you hold a refuge hostage?
That's what they did.
They did this for over a month. It was February 11th when police finally arrested them. And their leader, as you said, was this guy, Ammon
Bundy.
Ammon Bundy. And he had experience with this sort of thing. His dad had a ranch in Nevada, and they had a big standoff there against the BLM over grazing fees. Essentially, they took over this refuge because they wanted the federal government to give the land back to the states and really to the people so they could do whatever the hell they wanted on it with their cows.
It wasn't
the people,
historic.
not the historic, indigenous people.
No,
right? Okay.
No, silly.
Just to be clear.
The history of the place is it was a big cattle ranch back in the day, you know. So
yeah, but before that, there might have been some
other things going on.
some other stuff going on there.
Can we have a little aside here? What's with the name Bundy? I mean, if you're named Bundy, does that automatically make you some kind of
scary?
Scary criminal type, or at the very least, Al Bundy from Married with Children?
Exactly.
Yeah, I worry about that.
He was a great philosopher.
It's like if you want your kid to grow up to be a serial killer, just name them Bundy, right? Sorry to all of our Bundy listeners out there.
Just half of our listenership just dropped off.
Well, so one of the things about Ammon Bundy is that the philosophy went way beyond this kind of dispute over who has rights to the land. There's this entire undercurrent in that family of wackadoodle religious beliefs. And I don't want to bore everybody with my take on it because somebody's already done a really outstanding job of kind of going through this, and that's Leah Sotil. She has this long read article and a podcast called Bundyville, The Remnant, which I highly recommend, so check those out. But this guy, they're coming from a pretty weird kind of a philosophical, religious angle, and kind of like a prophet off the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and actually in that podcast, she traces back the origins of not only that whole sort of like war with the federal government thing, but the religious undertones that does go back to sort of these prophets that were part of this cult or sect of Christianity. And, we could talk about Cliven Bundy and the Bundy clan or whatever.
Great name, by the way, Cliven.
Yeah. And it's easy to sort of like make fun of them or think about them as sort of like these very extreme fringe voices out there in the wilderness, so to speak. But the truth is that, at least I suspect that as we get deeper and deeper into like environmental unraveling and social unraveling, as all the issues that we at Post Carbon Institute talk about, with energy issues and the economy and sociopolitical problems and all that stuff coming together, we're going to probably see more people like the Bundys, because I think the real story of what happened there at the refuge was all of these people coming in from across the country, that were drawn to this cause, right?
It wasn't just the birds anymore.
It wasn't just the birds. Well, and it wasn't just a Bundy clan, right?
Well, the aftermath is pretty crazy, too. I mean, they were prosecuted, but then they served no jail time, and they're basically let off.
Yeah. So I just, I think that we're going to be seeing more of these. And it's not just people on this quasi-white nationalist religious end, that we'll see as false prophets. We're going to see all kinds of different folks coming out. And that's why we wanted to talk about false prophets in this season 5 of Crazy Town.
I think the false prophets, it's pretty easy to pull an Ammon Bundy out and say, look at this guy. But there are a lot of other flavors of false prophets that are not quite so easy to pick out of the lineup, not quite so extreme. And I think we want to focus on those, the ones that, you kind of agree with a lot of what they're saying, but they get it wrong in one way or another, or they're sort of oversimplifying, providing an answer that doesn't really solve something as complex as climate change.
Yeah, I think we want to talk about people that maybe are more in the mainstream, that are more kind of influential and not ridiculed in maybe quite the way that the the Bundy clan has been, by the mainstream, and even people who are trying to maintain the status quo.
Well, in preparation for this season, my background was in systematics, taxonomy. I developed classification systems for plants
Yeah.
And,
well, and look at you. You've just turned that right into birds. And,
well, it is a similar tickle you get, like searching for the novelty of seeking the species out in nature. I did that for plants and I switched to birds, but I'm not a bird taxonomist, but I am a false prophet taxonomist.
Yes, this is a
sweet.
Yes.
You're going to be in high demand.
Yes, I am. So I have devised a schema of 9 false prophet typologies. Now, it's kind of fun, but I actually think it's useful. And the reason it's useful is because when you have terminology for something, it's easier to see it. The example they give of if you live where there's a lot of snow, you have more terms for snow than if you live like in Florida.
So if you live among the false prophets, you're going to have at least 9 different kinds.
Well, I think it's important because a lot like what Asher was getting at, a lot of times you're going to agree with much of what these folks are saying, but there's some key ways you can, if you have this sort of schema, if you understand where they're coming from, their philosophy, it's much, and you have a name for it, it's easier to sort of say, oh, this is what they're doing. They seem to come in different species.
Yeah, it's almost like the episode we did on cognitive biases and all the different flavors of that you have out there. Like once you know the types of cognitive bias, you can actually identify them and realize which ones you're susceptible to.
Well, and it makes it easier to ridicule them.
And
Let's be honest.
Okay. Well, we're just going to go through. There's 9. We're going to go through, and we're going to have examples of at least 9 of these folks in the season, and there'll be overlaps a little bit. It's complicated by schema, but just to give you an example. We're talking about this Bundy crowd.
Right.
They are a classic. What is now termed out there a Molotov mixologist.
Molotov mixologist.
Yeah, Molotov mixologist, and that is basically their motto is essentially this baby is irredeemable. Let's blow it up.
And by this, in that case, they're talking about the federal government, probably, right?
Yeah, that's what they're.
But it could apply to any big system, basically, like the civilization that we've got now. We're gonna throw Molotov cocktails.
Yeah, bring it down. Something better will rise out of it. Out of the ashes, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, let me give an example.
Yeah.
Somebody who's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, you love this guy.
Somebody I wish I could be more like.
I'm sorry I didn't give this name to you earlier in life. This is a recent find.
And we're not doing this guy as a false prophet this season. He's just an example
This is
of
just
the type.
What's the it's an appetizer.
Yeah.
It's an hors d'oeuvre.
Yeah, a little cheese on a cracker.
A fellow Jew, unfortunately. His name's Alex Epstein. You guys heard of this guy?
Oh yeah.
I have not.
Okay. So he's a classic man shiller, okay? Which, according to Jason's very elaborate, taxonomy, is a high-status professional who's well-paid to gaslight you into believing the shit cakes you see everywhere are actually made out of chocolate, okay? So our good buddy Alex, right?
You got some good quotes from him?
I'm not going to pull out any quotes because I might throw up, and that would be problematic.
Ruin the whole studio.
Well, get all over the microphone.
This is my home.
But Alex, he's the founder and president of, I would say, a real doppelganger nonprofit think tank to Post-Carbon Institute called the Center for Industrial Progress.
Yeah.
He's author of several books. He wrote a book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. And his latest book is called Fossil Future, which makes it, case for why we
need to... how we're all going to be fossils pretty
damn
quick.
No. We need to expand the use of fossil fuels in the future. Now, of course, and Rob, you'll really appreciate this. He used to be an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute.
Oh, sweet.
Your favorite place.
But I always wanted to work at the Nero Institute.
Right. Yeah. And he was a former fellow at the Ayn Rand Institute. So, he's got all the credentials you possibly need to go out there. I'm sure he gets no funding from the fossil fuel industry whatsoever. He just happens to be saying things.
What you said his place is called the Center for Indoctrinated Turd Buckets.
Close. Yeah, very close.
Well, what's interesting about his stuff, though, when you read it, it's over the top. But he talks about how important fossil fuels are to our modern way of life in ways that are very akin to what Richard Heimberg might say.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said doppelganger organization. I mean, very similar things, right?
Well, speaking of some similarities and shared ideas. I've got a typology that you shared with me, Jason, called the premature Cassandra-lator.
Yes. Yeah. I used to have that problem when I was young.
Yeah. I don't want to go into how you came up with these names, but the Cassandra part I understand, sort of a doom-saying. But anyway, the premature Cassandra-lator is about, you're sort of getting the story right, just not at the correct time, not in the right decade. And the example there could be somebody like Paul Ehrlich, who I think all three of us would say we really respect him as a scholar, and he's gotten a lot of things right, but prematurely predicted kind of the end of human well-being and progress.
Population growth. Really.
Yeah. Well, and he had that famous bet with Julian Simon about the prices of commodities. Mm-hmm. And, he bet that price would go up as commodities became more scarce. Julian Simon bet price would go down because we'd just magically figure this stuff out. And Ehrlich would have won if they'd have put the time frame a little more into the future, but he didn't. He prematurely Cassandra-lated.
Yes, he did. Yeah, and it's been a problem. I mean, I think he's made our job a lot harder, basically.
Well, he's not alone.
No.
I mean, let's go back to Malthus. You know, got it a little bit wrong there in terms of timing. We've had that with in the peak world community. I mean, I think all of us are. I
mean, Richard had a mea culpa, like, hey, I didn't see the shale boom happening so fast and at such scale.
Right.
Well, and then the three of us talk about this a lot. You can get into a very doomy or pessimistic mindset, but that's what we want to avoid. We're trying to avoid either optimism or despair. What you're looking for is what's the reality out there, and then what's the proper response.
And being open to new data points or the fact that things might play out in more complex ways than you might imagine. Looking at the shale example, right? The growth of shale gas and oil production really had to do with the overall economy tanking, and suddenly there was a bunch of money pumped into the system with no interest, right?
Yeah.
That's not part of the energy system, but it had a huge impact on the energy system, right?
Well, I think this typology is pretty cool. I can't wait to see what the other six or more that might end up. But I know, Jason, you've also dug a little deeper.
Yes.
And created another scale with
this. Right. Unlike last season when we covered mostly dead people.
Yes.
We're mostly covering people who are still alive. And so in that sense, when people are still alive, you can really get a sense of them as humans. You can get a sense of their personalities. And
especially in this day and age, there's lots of video of people out there.
Tweets and YouTubes.
You run into them at Whole Foods.
Yeah, exactly. And so, some of our false prophets seem like decent chaps, actually, you might not mind having a beer with them.
You're saying chaps.
Yeah.
Just come out straight and say, we're only doing men this season.
It seems like that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're so much easier to find, these freaking men who have unfounded confidence.
How many female cult leaders have there been, actually?
That's a great question. We'll ask the chat GTP or whatever, or GPT or whatever it's called. But anyway, others are clear wackadoodles and or sociopaths, and you wouldn't want to get near them in a room. And so we have what's called the insufferable douchebag coefficient. And so this is a very clear scoring system. And the three of us will, for each episode, give our score on a scale of 1 to 10. Or
it's completely objective.
Yes. Like a Nelson Mandela would be very low, near the bottom, 1. And Tucker Carlson.
Meaning he's sufferable.
Yeah, he's
you would want to hang with him.
Exactly. And of course, Tucker Carlson is going to be at the far, I would vomit if I got near the guy, probably.
Oh, right. I invited him to your birthday party, but he didn't show.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll get into that in the first,
most people don't know that Tucker's middle name is Bundy, just like a Cher's. It's Tucker Bundy Carlson.
And I guess I should just come out and say Tucker and I are pretty close.
Yeah.
We're buds.
Yeah.
I don't find him insufferable at all.
Well, he's going to score low for you then. Yeah. Well, I don't think we're doing him, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Right. So, look, hopefully we'll have fun this season talking about some of these false prophets. But there's a reason why we wanted to explore some of these people. And it wasn't just talking about their influence. It was also an opportunity to kind of dig into certain topics. And what we found actually that there were some sort of themes around the folks that we identified. So one of them is the progress myth. Mm-hmm. We're going to get into that. People who are sort of pushing that belief system, which we've talked about in previous episodes as being deeply entrenched, at least in the modern view of the world.
Yeah, and always without attribution to the lottery of energy resources that we found.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm. We've got neoliberalism, something else we've also talked about before, but there's a clear thread there. Ecomodernism.
Yeah.
So basically, what you're saying is you don't like freedom.
No,
that's what
I don't like isms. I don't like any isms. We got effective altruism. Mm-hmm. And we've got doomerism, which I think, we were very mindful of looking at some of the edges, in our own...
The Venn diagrams here.
Yeah. I mean, in kind of the circles that we inhabit sometimes, people tend to resort more in that direction. And I think it's worth shining a light on that as well.
And I'll also say, we all know I'm the least well-read of the three of us. I try not to pay attention to the news, but this effective altruism was a totally new topic to me, but I know it just drives you absolutely insane to share.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing that one of the leading champions of effective altruism, just his entire company blew up and he's going to prison.
Yeah.
So
that is good.
That'll help.
That made you happy.
That's the little things.
A little chef's kiss on that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out that there's a difference between the really easy targets like the Ammon Bundys and the people that we're covering. So, I really appreciate the topics you just laid out, Asher. I think that's kind of why we settled in on the folks we did. And some of them are not who you would expect, right? They're left-wingers. Some would be considered progressives. Some, and they're, might be a little bit surprising. I mean, maybe not to our highly intelligent audience, but not, we're not picking these just super
They're
easy.
not all Alex Epsteins and Ammon Bundys.
Yeah, it's not a Donald Trump or,
right.
It's just, that would be too easy.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to keep the personal attacks to a minimum. Sometimes I might get a little worked up.
Yeah.
Which is maybe where the insufferable douchebag coefficient comes in.
Right.
But, these are living beings that are out there in the world,
Yeah. They deserve some...
In many cases, well-intentioned.
They deserve something.
Yeah. In many cases, well-intentioned.
Well, and, we're going to have to score ourselves on the insufferable douchebag coefficient,
Actually,
too.
maybe our listeners
should.
Right.
We could have our listeners
I should not have invited them to do that.
It only goes to 10. I thought you were an 11. Like Spinal Tap.
Yeah, turn it up to 11. Last thing I'll just say about this season is we are going to keep the Do the Opposite segment. It's fun to complain and point out all these dangerous trends out there and influences out there, but we want to be talking about what directions we want to be going in. So we're going to be sticking with that and look forward to hopefully some inspiring examples.
Doing the
opposite.
It'd be cool if there was an actual person, like a demon angel thing, like there was the literal opposite of that person. Yeah, but I don't think that exists, does it?
Well, what would it be? What would it be if we stick with Ammon Bundy as an example? What would be the opposite? And I guess opposite. I guess this is a good way to look at this. Is like there's the opposite person, but also the opposite ideas might be more critical, right?
Yes, in that case, like trying to claim federal government land for personal gain. Right?
Yeah, what's the opposite of saying I'm going to take over federal land and make it my own?
Well, I recently read a story that's gotten some pretty good press near Los Angeles, this Bruce's Beach, that I think is maybe a good counter Bundy. The story is that about 100 years ago, Willa and Charles Bruce, this couple who happened to be black, they owned some beachfront property near Los Angeles, and this is back in the Jim Crow era. So the place had come to be known as Bruce's Beach, and these owners, they got harassed a lot by their white neighbors, and then the KKK got involved. And then in 1924, the city actually took the property through eminent domain. So they're like, this is ours. And recently, fast forward many, many years and skip past all the suffering and unfairness that came with that, the Los Angeles County gave the land back to the family, kind of a reparations.
But that's going from
deal.
like the public back to private.
Kind of, but then the family has decided, well, this is become kind of it's a public area.
It's become
park.
It had been a park, right?
Yeah, and so they're like, we're going to just sell it right back to LA County because we want people to be able to experience this place. So it's kind of a cool story of like getting some reparations to the family, but also still keeping it as a park space.
Huh.
Yeah, and along those lines, there's the land back movement, which is trying to bring land back into the hands of indigenous communities. And they often use land trusts to purchase traditional stolen land, take it out of the private market, put it into collective care. There are also some really inspiring and innovative black lead projects that aim to reclaim land stolen from African Americans, like you were just talking about, including something called the Acres of Ancestry Initiative or the Black Agrarian Trust. So it's not just about putting in the hands of private owners, but there are also really innovative experiments of looking how to do them using cooperative models. And we'll provide some examples in the show notes. For folks.
So we'll try to give you guys examples of these anti-false prophet or true prophets.
Let's avoid prophets in general, I think.
Anyway, smart people doing cool stuff out there, and maybe some ideas how you can get involved throughout the season.
And I've got a number of taxonomic publications out there. You can go find them if you ever care to read any of them. No one has, but a few people have.
I read them daily.
Yeah.
Is this going to go into part of your academic literature?
I'm hoping it will. Yeah. There's stuff from Madagascar and South America and New Caledonia. And South Pacific. I got a lot of good taxonomic work, but I think this may be my finest. And the Phalse Prophet taxonomy, I'm very proud of it. It'll probably get read more than anything else I've done. And so we're going to publish this.
That means 2 readers instead of 1, right?
Yeah, that's double, man.
Yeah. So if you go to postcarbon.org/crazytown, we'll have some link in there, and you can look at the Phalse Prophet taxonomic work. But also drop us a line if you have suggestions of characters that would fit any of these typologies, these species. Let us know.
And it could be actually a bit of a cheat sheet for you if you're trying to anticipate who we might cover later, right?
Yeah.
So, that might ring some bells for you.
We could have a betting pool or something like that set up, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I really can't wait to cover some of these false prophets. I learn so much every time we do a season that I can't wait to go through this with you guys.
And let me just say really fast, we should thank Alana Zuber, our stellar, incredible volunteer who's been working behind the scenes for months to pull together information about all of these folks.
Yeah.
Talk about vomit-inducing things. She's got a strong gut.
I think we almost broke her brain with some of the people we had her looking into.
Yeah.
But she's got some strength. So yeah, she's still with us. Well, one of the things that got me thinking in this episode is this whole Ammon Bundy stuff.
Yeah.
We're calling him a false prophet, but I think he's maybe onto something.
Okay.
You guys know the William L. Finley National Wildlife Refuge?
It's about 8 miles south. Muddy Creek, which is right out here, goes right to it.
Yeah.
So I know it pretty darn well. I love that place.
Yeah. Well, there probably aren't that many people working there. You think we could go take it over for the next month or so?
I bet we can do 2 months there. I bet we get 2 months.
Before anyone notices?
No. It's a pretty nice...
Yeah, a lot of people go.
A lot of people go there, but I hope we can hold it for twice as long as the Bundys did.
Yeah, screw those guys.
And I think we will get so much publicity. This will be perfect.
We'll rename it Crazy Town National Wildlife Refuge.
This is a way to make us go viral.
Viral.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you want others to consider these issues, then please share Crazy Town with your friends. Hit that share button in your podcast app or just tell them face to face. Maybe you can start some much needed conversations and do some things together to get us out of Crazy Town. Thanks again for listening and sharing.
You know, becoming a cult leader may be one of the best ways to survive the coming apocalypse. Just think about the security of having easily hundreds of totally devoted people, all with their accumulated wealth, knowledge, security, and provisioning skills at your disposal. But getting a cult together is a lot of work, often requiring years of development to hone speeches, fine-tune entrancing facial expressions, perfect coercion tactics, and trial painful binding rituals. Well now, the time to develop your cult can be shortened from years to seconds using the AI cult generator. Answer questions about your political leanings, geography, religious background, gender identity, comfort with firearms, favorite movie and Kool-Aid flavor, and a full-blown, personally customized cult manual will be created. AI cult generator. Finding the evil genius in all of us.
Crazy town, da 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 da, crazy town.